All right. All right, buddies. All right, comrades. Today, talking about this MintPress news piece. And I'll go ahead and make a little bit of room for activities here. An intellectual no-fly zone. An intellectual no-fly zone. Online censorship of Ukraine dissent is becoming the new norm. This should be very scary. Censorship is the last resort of desperate and unpopular regimes. It magically appears to make a crisis go away. It comforts the powerful with the narrative they want to hear, one fed back to them by courtiers in the media, government agencies, think tanks, and academia. That's Chris Hedges there. All right, Alan McLeod wrote this piece. Alan McLeod seems to be a pretty good dude. I'm going to go ahead and make this. I'm not going to be reading this out loud. I'm going to be utilizing some text-to-speech here. All right, I hope you enjoy this as much as I did this morning.
Mountain View, California, Google has sent a warning shot across the world, ominously informing media outlets, bloggers, and content creators that it will no longer tolerate certain opinions when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Earlier this month, Google AdSense sent a message to a myriad of publishers, including MintPress News.
Whoops. That seems to stop the audio when I do that. Let me try that again. Including MintPress News. Let's see if this works.
Informing us that, due to the war in Ukraine, we will pause monetization of content that exploits, dismisses, or condones the war. This content, it went on to say, includes, but is not limited to, claims that imply victims are responsible for their own tragedy or similar instances of victim blaming, such as claims
that Ukraine is committing genocide or deliberately attacking its own citizens. All right, I don't know why it's cutting off like this now. It was working so well earlier.
This builds on a similar message Google's subsidiary YouTube released last month, stating, "Our community guidelines prohibit content denying, minimizing or trivializing well-documented violent events. We are now removing content about Russia's invasion in Ukraine that violates this policy."
All right, it keeps cutting out. I'm not 100% sure where I was here, but I think I was here on this last paragraph.
This builds on a similar message Google's subsidiary YouTube released last month, stating, "Our community guidelines prohibit content denying, minimizing or trivializing well-documented violent events. We are now removing content about Russia's invasion in Ukraine that violates this policy."
Oh. All right, this is a new voice. It might be jarring here. Here we go.
Journalist and filmmaker Abby Martin was deeply troubled by the news. "It is really disturbing that this is the trend that we're on," she told MintPress, adding, "It is a preposterous declaration considering that the victim is whoever we are told by our foreign policy establishment. It really is outrageous to be told by these tech giants that taking the wrong side of a conflict that is quite complicated will now hurt your views, derank you on social media or limit your ability to fund your work. So you have to toe the line in order to survive as a journalist in alternative media today." The most prominent victim of the recent banning spate has been Russian state media such as RT America, whose entire catalog has been blocked throughout most of the world. RT America was also blocked from broadcasting across the US, leading to the network's sudden closure. Censorship is the last resort of desperate and unpopular regimes. It magically appears to make a crisis go away. It comforts the powerful with the narrative they want to hear, one fed back to them by courtiers in the media, government agencies, think tanks, and academia, wrote journalist Chris Hedges, adding, "YouTube disappeared 6 years of my RT show. On Contact, although not one episode dealt with Russia. It is not a secret as to why my show vanished. It gave a voice to writers and dissidents, including Noam Chomsky and Cornel West, as well as activists from Extinction Rebellion, Black Lives Matter, third parties and the prison abolitionist movement. Smaller, independent creators have also been purged. My stream last night on RBN was censored on YouTube after debunking the Bucker massacre narrative. Unreal censorship going on right now," wrote Nick from the Revolutionary Black Network. "My video, Bucker, More Lies, has been deleted by YouTube's censors. The official narrative is now, Bucker was a Russian atrocity. No dissent allowed," Chilean-American journalist Gonzalo Lira added. Other social media platforms have pursued similar policies. Twitter permanently suspended the account of former weapons inspector Scott Ritter over his comments on Bucker and journalist Pepe Escobar for his support for Russia's invasion.
Some of those may be problematic names for one reason or another. Not 100% sure. I'm not close to the details on these guys.
Those views are certainly currently in the minority, with testimonies from locals pointing
But
the
still,
finger
like,
at Russian forces who have carried out similar
they
acts
banned them
during
for
other
other
conflicts.
reasons.
Yet even the Pentagon has refused to categorically conclude Russian culpability without a full investigation. Beyond Bucca, where the line is in terms of accepted speech is being kept vague, leading to confusion and consternation among independent media outlets and content creators. This is going to limit reporting on the Ukraine crisis because people are going to be scared, Martin said. People in alternative media are going to opt to not publish or not report on something because of fear of retaliation. And once you start to get demonetized, the next fear is that your videos are going to get blanket banned, she added. While support for Russia has essentially been prohibited, glorification of even the most unsavory elements of Ukrainian society on social media is now all but promoted. In February, Facebook announced that it would not only reverse its ban on discussing the Azov Battalion, a Nazi paramilitary now formally incorporated into the Ukrainian National Guard, but also allow content praising and promoting the group, as long as it was in the context of killing Russians. Facebook and Instagram also instituted a change in policy that allows users to call for harm or even the death of Russian and Belarusian soldiers and politicians.
Wow.
This rare allowance was also given in 2021 to those calling for the death of Iranian leaders. Needless to say, violent content directed at governments friendly to the US, such as Ukraine, is still strictly forbidden.
You're saying New Age McCarthyism, but it's like, yeah. But it's like, you know, it's like the public square. It's like where we talk. Right? And it's being done by like private corporations.
The media demands more censorship. Leading the campaign for more intense censorship has been corporate media itself. The Financial Times successfully lobbied Amazon-owned streaming platform Twitch to delete a number of pro-Russian streamers. The Daily Beast attacked Gonzalo Lira, going so far as to contact the Ukrainian government to make them aware of Lira's work. Lira confirmed that, after the Daily Beast's article, he was arrested by the Ukrainian secret police. Meanwhile, the New York Times published a hit piece on anti-war journalist Ben Norton, accusing him of spreading a conspiracy theory that the US was involved in a coup in Ukraine in 2014.
It's true.
While claiming that he was helping promulgate Russian disinformation. This, despite the fact that the Times itself reported on the 2014 coup at the time in a not too dissimilar fashion, thereby incriminating its own previous reporting as Russian propaganda. If referencing the New York Times' own previous reporting becomes grounds for suppression, then meaningful online discourse is under threat. As journalist Matt Taibbi wrote last week, the West is in danger of establishing an intellectual no-fly zone, where deviating from orthodoxy will no longer be tolerated.
Arrested by who? I think it's whom, but this Ukrainian secret police makes you wonder, right? Really makes you wonder. And we previously talked about this piece from the New York Times. They put a screen capture with a red line through it of the video, denying their audience of actually hearing what Ben was saying. Awful shit right there. And then taking what he said, that we cooed them in 2014, which is true, and then trying to say that he's doing misinformation. Yep, that's what's happening there. That's what's happening there.
The invasion of Ukraine has also raised a number of troubling questions for Western anti-war figures: how to oppose Russian aggression without providing more political ammunition to NATO governments to further escalate the conflict, and how to critique and highlight our own government's roles in creating the crisis without appearing to justify the Kremlin's actions. Yet this new perilous media environment raises a further quandary: how to express views online without being censored. Google's new updated rules are vaguely worded and open to interpretation. What constitutes exploiting or condoning the war? Does discussing NATO's eastward expansion or Ukraine's aggressive campaign against Russian-speaking minorities constitute victim blaming? And is referencing the 7-year-long civil war in the Donbas region, where the UN estimates that over 14,000 people have been killed, now illegal under Google's policy of not allowing content about Ukraine attacking its own citizens? For some, the answer to at least some of these questions should be an emphatic yes. On Thursday, journalist Hubert Smeets attacked longtime anti-war activist Noam Chomsky, explicitly accusing him of blaming President Zelensky and Ukraine for its fate. Chomsky has previously described Russian actions as incontestably a major war crime, ranking alongside the US invasion of Iraq and the Hitler-Stalin invasion of Poland in September 1939. Yet he has also for years warned that NATO actions in the region were likely to provoke a Russian response. If Google and other big tech monopolies decide an intellectual giant like Chomsky's voice must be suppressed, it will mark a new era of official censorship not seen since the decline of McCarthyism.
Now they're putting themselves in a tough spot of censoring Chomsky there. But at the same time, yeah, they're, New York Times previously reported on the coup. Are they going to go back and censor themselves? Like, what? Come on, they got to pick a lane here. They got to, figure out that we notice them doing this as well. We see this. And there is a new era of official censorship. And I think they're going to get into it a little bit here. Despite Chomsky not being censored yet. All right, there's a big chunk here. Let me just grab a couple 2-3 paragraphs.
Old propaganda, New Cold War. The United States was allied with the Soviet Union during World War II. However, as the Cold War began to set in, so did attacks on dissenting voices.
Check this out.
The post-war anti-communist push began in earnest in 1947, after President Harry S. Truman mandated a loyalty oath for all federal employees.
Bad.
As a result, the political beliefs of 2 million people were investigated, with authorities attempting to ascertain whether they belonged to any subversive political organization.
That's freedom, baby.
Those in positions of influence were most aggressively vetted, leading to purges of academics, educators, and journalists. Many of the most celebrated individuals from the world of entertainment, including actor Charlie Chaplin, singer Paul Robeson, and writer Orson Welles, had their careers destroyed because of their political beliefs. Socialism was cancelled. Dissent was cancelled after World War II, Breakthrough News host Brian Becker recently said, warning that this new Cold War with Russia and China could usher in a new McCarthyist era.
Oh God.
The old Cold War against Russia ended in 1991. However, the new Cold War arguably started 25 years later with the electoral victory of Donald Trump. On November 8, 2016, the Clinton campaign alleged that the Kremlin had used social media to spread fake news and misleading information, leading to Trump's victory. Despite the lack of hard evidence, corporate media immediately took up Clinton's message. Only 2 weeks after the election, The Washington Post published a report claiming that hundreds of fake news websites had pushed Trump over the line and that a credible group of nonpartisan expert researchers had created an organization called Prop or Not to track this effort.
Washington Post? The CIA Post, you mean? I don't know what to think of that.
Using what it called sophisticated internet analytics tools, Prop or Not published a list of over 200 websites that they claimed were routine peddlers of Russian propaganda. Included on the list were publisher WikiLeaks, Trump-supporting websites like the Drudge Report, libertarian ventures such as the Ron Paul Institute and Antiwar.com, as well as a host of left-wing websites like Truthout, Truthgeek, and the Black Agenda Report. MintPress News was also featured on the list. While there were some obviously fake news websites included, the political orientation of the list was obvious for all to see. This was a catalogue of outlets, right and left-wing, that was consistently critical of the centrist Washington establishment. A sure sign that you are reading Russian propaganda, Prop or Not claimed, was if the source criticizes Obama, Clinton, NATO, the mainstream media, or expresses worry about a nuclear war with Russia. As Prop or Not explained, Russian propaganda never suggests conflict with Russia would just result in a Cold War II and Russia's eventual peaceful defeat, like the last time. Despite the blatantly shoddy list, one that even included the websites of Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists, the Washington Post's article went viral, being shared millions of times.
Really?
Prop or Not's list was subsequently signal-boosted by hundreds of other outlets. And despite calling for McCarthyist investigation into and suppression of hundreds of outlets, Prop or Not categorically refused to reveal who they were, how they were funded, or any methodology whatsoever.
Wow. No fucking way, dude. No way.
It is now almost certain that it was not
Mr.
a neutral,
Vance?
well-meaning independent organization but the creation of Michael Weiss, a non-resident senior fellow of NATO think tank the Atlantic Council. A scan of Prop or Not's website showed that it was controlled by The Interpreter, a magazine of which Weiss is editor-in-chief. Furthermore, one investigator found dozens of examples of the Twitter accounts of prop or not and vice using the identical and very unusual turn of phrase, strongly suggesting they were one and the same. Thus, claims of a huge foreign state propaganda campaign were themselves state propaganda. The reaction to this crude propaganda about propaganda campaign was both swift and wide-ranging. In early 2017, Google launched Project Owl, a massive overhaul of its algorithm. It claimed that it was purely a measure to stop foreign fake news from taking over the internet. The main outcome, however, was a catastrophic overnight collapse in search traffic to high-quality alternative media outlets, drops from which they have never recovered. MintPress News lost nearly 90% of its organic Google search traffic and Truthout lost 25%. Websites that were not on Proponot's list also suffered devastating losses. Alternet experienced a 63% reduction, Common Dreams 37%,
That's information warfare.
36%. Even liberal sources only moderately critical of the status quo, such as The Nation and Mother Jones, were penalized by the algorithm. Google search traffic to alternative media has never recovered and has, in many cases, gotten worse.
This is sus as fuck, dude. World Socialist website obtains statistical data from SEMrush, estimating the decline of traffic generated by Google searches for 13 sites with substantial readerships. Results are as follows. The World Socialist website.org fell by 67%, two-thirds. Alternet.org, 63%. All right. Even Democracy Now! Even Democracy Now! Like mild criticisms. Okay.
This, for Martin, is a sign of the increasingly close relationship between Silicon Valley and the national security state.
That's not good.
Google willingly changed their algorithm to backpage all alternative media without even a law in place to mandate him to do so, she said. Other social media juggernauts, such as Facebook and YouTube, rolled out similar changes. All penalized alternative media and drove people back towards establishment sources like The Washington Post, CNN, and Fox News.
Not good.
The consequence of all this was to retighten the elite's grip over the means of communication, a grip that had slipped owing to the rise of the internet as an alternative model.
And that's arguably what they wanted.
The nationalization of social media since 2016, a number of other measures have been taken to bring social media under the wing of the national security state. This was foreseen by Google executives Eric Schmidt and Jared Cohen, who wrote in 2013, "What Lockheed Martin was to the 20th century, technology and cybersecurity companies will be to the 21st. Since then, Google, Microsoft, Amazon and IBM have become integral parts of the state apparatus, signing multi-billion-dollar contracts with the CIA and other organizations to provide them with intelligence, logistics and computing services." Schmidt himself was chairman of both the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence and the Defense Innovation Advisory Board, bodies created to help Silicon Valley assist the U.S. military with cyber weapons.
What?
Further blurring the lines between big tech and big government. Google's current global head of developer product policy, Ben Render, has an even closer relationship with the national security state. From being a strategic planner and information management officer for NATO, he then moved to Google in 2008. In 2013, he began working for U.S. Cyber Command and in 2015 for the Defense Innovation Unit, both divisions of the Department of Defense. At the same time, he became a YouTube executive, rising to the rank of Director of Operations.
What? Did you hear that?
Other platforms have similar relationships with Washington. In 2018, Facebook announced that it had entered a partnership with the Atlantic Council whereby the latter would help curate the news feeds of billions of users worldwide, deciding what was credible, trustworthy information, and what was fake news. As noted previously, the Atlantic Council is NATO's brain trust and is directly funded by the military alliance. Last year, Facebook also hired Atlantic Council senior fellow and former NATO spokesperson Ben Nimmo as its head of intelligence, thereby giving an enormous amount of control over its empire to current and former national security state officials. The Atlantic Council has also worked its way into Reddit's management. Jessica Ashew went straight from being Deputy Director of Middle East Strategy at the Atlantic Council to Director of Policy at the popular news aggregation service, a surprising career move that drew few remarks at the time. Also eliciting little comment was the unmasking of a senior Twitter executive as an active duty officer in the British Army's notorious 77th Brigade, a unit dedicated to online warfare and psychological operations. Twitter has since partnered with the US government and weapons manufacturer-sponsored think tank ASPI to help police its platform. On ASPI's orders, the social media platform has purged hundreds of thousands of accounts based out of China, Russia, and other countries that draw Washington's ire. Last year, Twitter also announced that it had deleted hundreds of user accounts for undermining faith in the NATO alliance and its stability, a statement that drew widespread incredulity from those not closely following the company's progression from one that championed open discussion to one closely controlled by the government.
Undermining faith in the NATO alliance and its stability? I'm a little bit stunned. I did not pre-read this entire article. Like what? NATO is bad. I don't know. This is truly alarming for me.
The first casualty. Those in the halls of power well understand how important a weapon big tech is in a global information war. This can be seen in a letter published last Monday written by a host of national security state officials, including former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, former CIA Directors Michael Morell and Leon Panetta, and former Director of the NSA Admiral Michael Rogers. Together, they warn that regulating or breaking up the big tech monopolies would inadvertently hamper the ability of U.S. technology platforms to push back on the Kremlin. The United States will need to rely on the power of its technology sector to ensure that the narrative of events globally is shaped by the U.S. and not by foreign adversaries, they explain. Concluding that Google, Facebook, Twitter are increasingly integral to U.S. diplomatic and national security efforts. Commenting on the letter, journalist Glenn Greenwald wrote, Why maintaining all power in the hands of the small coterie of tech monopolies which control the internet and which have long proven their loyalty to the U.S. security state. The ability of the U.S. national security state to maintain a closed propaganda system around questions of war and militarism is guaranteed.
Good take. I don't love Glenn, but that's a good take. Folks, your brain is better off if you do not epistemologically deplatform people.
The U.S. has frequently leaned on social media in order to control the message and promote regime change in target countries. Just days before the Nicaraguan presidential election in November, Facebook deleted the accounts of hundreds of the country's top news outlets, journalists and activists, all of whom supported the left-wing Sandinista government. When those figures poured onto Twitter to protest the ban, recording videos of themselves and proving that they were not bots or inauthentic accounts, as Facebook intelligence chief Nimo had claimed, their Twitter accounts were systematically banned as well. In what observers coined as a double tap strike. Meanwhile, in 2009, Twitter acquiesced to a U.S. request to delay scheduled maintenance of its app, which would have required taking it offline, because pro-U.S. activists in Iran were using the platform to foment anti-government demonstrations. More than 10 years later, Facebook announced that it would be deleting all praise of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani from its many platforms, including Instagram and WhatsApp. Soleimani, the most popular political figure in Iran, had recently been assassinated in a U.S. drone strike.
What?
The event sparked uproar and massive protests across the region.
Yeah, Glenn.
Yet because the Trump administration had declared Soleimani and his military group to be terrorists, Facebook explained, "We operate under U.S. sanctions laws."
You cut out there. You're doing so good.
Including those related to the U.S. government's designation of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and its leadership. This meant that Iranians could not share a majority viewpoint inside their own country, even in their own language, because of a decision made in Washington by a hostile government.
Roll. You want to go back to the Nicaragua story? Be happy to allow you to do that. Is there something you need me to see, or is there something you need to see? All right. War has come to alternative media. We must say no to censorship. Help us rebuild our alternative media. MintPress News.
Hey everyone, I'm Manar Adley, founder and editor-in-chief of MintPress News and director of our new video project Behind the Headlines. I have an urgent appeal to make to everyone who cares not only for our First Amendment, but for the future of our planet. Independent watchdog journalism that holds the military class accountable is under threat. With the war in Ukraine raging on and corporate media outlets pushing a pro-war agenda, we've entered wartime where having access to alternative information to the war machine is crucial to preventing escalation. The nuclear arms race is not a joke. We're experiencing an unprecedented amount of censorship, unlike anything we've seen before.
It's true.
Just in the last month, independent anti-war journalists have been targeted in an organized smear campaign, deplatformed, outright purged off of social media platforms, and even given state-affiliated labels on their accounts. YouTube has deleted hundreds of thousands of historical videos for prominent anti-war journalists and figures, including Abby Martin, Chris Hedges, and Lee Camp, and is demonetizing political content everywhere to hit our bank accounts. Our very own fundraisers on GoFundMe were just taken down without reason and an opportunity to appeal. And this doesn't even include the past 5 years of being algorithmically shadow banned and targeted by big tech. These are the modern day book burners. They are trying to discredit the work of the most important dissenting voices of our time. They want to cause division and censor any information that challenges the corporate and military establishment's agenda. They want war to fill the bank accounts of the executives at Raytheon and Lockheed Martin.
Yes.
For the last several years, MintPress has been at the forefront of sounding the alarm about the deep state working with Silicon Valley tech giants like Google, Facebook, and Twitter to control the free flow of information.
Literally,
and your news feed to ensure any sort of alternative information or narrative to the establishment algorithmically disappears. We are nowhere near backing down because the future of our planet and the prosperity of peace and justice depend on our reporting. This is why I've partnered up with the Media Freedom Foundation and Project Censored to create a new video reporting project called Behind the Headlines. To help us build this project, we will need your support. We need to raise $400,000 in the next year. So we're creating our first phase fundraiser to be stated for $200,000, and it's just a 2-month campaign. The goal here is to create a video platform that is 100% people funded, a nonprofit video platform with the most important dissenting names in independent media that have felt the brunt of this censorship campaign. We're working with political comedian Lee Camp and filmmaker and investigative journalist Dan Cohen. Our board includes FBI whistleblower Colleen Rowley, international human rights attorney Todd Pierce, and president of the Media Freedom Foundation, the director of Project Censored himself, Mickey Huff. Lee Camp is from a long line of political comedians, from George Carlin to Bill Hicks. We're giving him a platform with full editorial freedom to write and produce his own political comedy. Lee Camp's shows are like a form of investigative comedy. They give the audience something to think about regarding key issues of the day that are often distorted in the establishment press or ignored altogether. Given the many challenges we face, from the climate crisis, forever wars, and the global pandemic, it's important to laugh when and how we can. Otherwise, we'd have to just wail and cry. Lee blends wit and dark humor with quality reporting that is truly a call to action. Dan Cohen is a jack of all trades. He's an investigative journalist based in Washington, D.C., reporting from the belly of the beast. He's currently working on several guerrilla-style documentaries where he traveled to the heart of conflicts targeted by U.S. imperialism and corporate pillaging. The first is a 3-part series about a revolution in formation in Haiti. Another is about the failures of the peace accords in Colombia. Another about resistance in Gaza and Israel's temple movement and their plans to destroy Al-Aqsa as part of an end-of-times prophecy. All of these issues trace back to the U.S. empire and its plots to create and maintain instability around the world.
This is really
Now,
good.
in addition to the documentaries and written investigations, Dan is also leading our video investigative series called Behind the Headlines. He has exposed how corporate media is in bed with the Pentagon, the Biden administration, and much, much more. For far too long, some of the best and most important dissenting journalists have been forced to turn to foreign state media to produce the most groundbreaking watchdog journalism.
Yeah.
Because the U.S. legacy media has completely failed the public.
Yes.
It specializes in producing fast food news that is sensationalized, divisive, working as a mouthpiece for the two-party duopoly, weapons manufacturers like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, and hawkish think tanks that are directly funded by NATO. We don't have a watchdog media anymore. We have an extremist corporate media beating the drums of war. So we can't rely on the legacy media in our own country to tell us what exactly is happening at home and around the world. We shouldn't have to go to foreign state media outlets to fill in those holes either.
First time
it's time that we create our own and become the media. The truth is, we can't keep waiting for the oligarchy to give us a media that represents we the people. It's time we unite on a broader front of nonpartisanship that holds the elite accountable, the way journalism is defined by our First Amendment, to revive the fourth estate and create our very own media that goes behind the headlines. It's time that we put our money where our mouths are, because our First Amendment and its free press, free speech principles are all on life support. To help us build this project, we will need your support. We have to raise $400,000 in the next year. So we're going to start with this $200,000 first phase fundraiser for the next 2 months. And here's what it's going to support.
All right. You get the idea there. 400K. We've done a little shallow dive into Nicaraguan politics and the Sandinistas and the Contras. Did I just make that up? No, that's exactly what happened, right? Or the Contras were... I don't know. I'll have to look back into that. Like I said, a shallow dive. We're right about here. Almost done with the article.
In this light, then, Google's message to creators about victim-blaming Ukraine or trivializing and condoning violence is a threat: toe the line or face the consequences. While we continue to consider tech monopolies such as Google, Twitter, and Facebook to be private companies, their overwhelming size and their increasing proximity to the national security state means that their actions are tantamount to state censorship.
That's the thing.
While fake news, including that emanating from Russia, continues to be a genuine problem. These new actions have far less to do with combating disinformation or denial of war crimes and far more to do with re-establishing elite control over the field of communication.
Yep.
These new rules will not be applied to corporate media downplaying or justifying U.S. aggression abroad, denying American war crimes, or blaming oppressed peoples, such as Palestinians or Yemenis, for their own condition. But instead will be used as excuses to derate, demote, delist, or even delete voices critical of war and imperialism. In war, they say, truth is always the first casualty.
All right. Well, I think that was really good writing. Again, Alan McLeod writing this here for MintPress News. I learned a lot. And I do believe maybe that's what's happening here. I mean, if you have power to control communication, you're going to do it. And that's what the elites have. They have the power to do that. That's why you're seeing people like Chris Hedges get ripped off of... I don't know if I could find Chris... I think Chris Hedges' quote was at the top. Chris Hedges getting pulled off of YouTube because he made content for RT America. He didn't talk about Russia, allegedly. Like, what is going on? They're pulling like really good content off the air, and you've got to ask yourself why. I think perhaps this was maybe one of the more revealing things in 2018. Facebook announced it entered a partnership with the Atlantic Council. They're going to curate the news feeds of billions of users worldwide. Oh my gosh, maybe that's one of the reasons, like, it started going down the tubes. It was heading down the tubes, and they partnered with the Atlantic Council. This is so bad. All think tanks are bad. And then they hired a former NATO spokesperson as its head of intelligence. This is a huge red flag. That's wild stuff right there. All right. Oh, and then a Twitter exec was revealed to be an active duty officer in this Britain's notorious 77th Brigade. This is just wild stuff here. And it just, you're surprised, but at the same time, you're not surprised to hear it. So you're saying Elon now owns one of the state's loudest megaphones? It appears maybe that's the case. But will the U.S. government and weapons manufacturer-sponsored think tank ASPI continue to police its platform? Because that's one of the things that Elon said he didn't like, was the way it's being censored, way it's being moderated, right? So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I didn't know that Twitter announced it deleted hundreds of accounts for undermining faith in NATO. Let me put it this way. NATO's faith should be undermined. And to read this is out of this world. This is a quote. Undermining faith in the NATO alliance and its stability. We'll leave it at that. And that's the YouTube clip. Live audience, stick around. This is the end of the YouTube clip. Folks, if you made it to the end of the YouTube clip, way to go. Hit the follow button, subscribe, hit the bell. And definitely like the video and comment below. It helps the content. It helps the algorithm, in the algorithm, whatever. And share with your friends. If you want to support on Patreon, that's maybe one of the best ways to support the channel. $3 a month gets you early access to my leftist and chill interviews, and it means a tremendous amount to me. We're trying to make that line go up. Let's go ahead and thank some of these patrons. Thank you, patrons, so much for supporting the channel, including Blake B. Thank you, Blake. Boondocks Dragon, Jasmine, Ira, Vivian, Nasai. We got Sleeve McDykel. Thank you, Raul, Kevin, Bobson, Doug Nuts. Thank you, Dean, Mike Truck, and Todd Gonzalez, longtime supporter of the channel, Todd Gonzalez.